ESPN's annual ranking of the top 100 players in the NBA was just released. What did they get right about Miami's best players, and what did they get wrong? Well, we'll let you know on today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. Whether you're tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. I'm Wes Goldberg, editor at allyoucanheat.com, here with David Ramil. Both of us are credentialed Heat media members who cover this team every single day, and the best way to support the show is to leave a 5-star rating and review on your podcast app and join more than 14,000 Locked On Heat lifers by subscribing on YouTube. A reminder that you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Well, David, it's that time again. It's time of the year for NBA player rankings. ESPN came out with theirs. The Ringer came out with theirs. You could see a few other rankings around the internet. And now we get to debate these rankings and where the Heat players are. But before we get to that, I wanted to give you my top 20 players. And then you could tell me where I'm wrong.
Okay, that's fair.
All right, number 1, Nikola Jokic. Number 2, I got Luka. 3, I've got Giannis. 4 is Shea. 5, I've got Embiid. Any disagreements with my top 5 yet?
Embiid's too high.
Okay, I've got Tatum, Steph, and LeBron at 6, 7, and 8. Where should Embiid fall? Lower than those guys?
No, I think that's fair. It just doesn't feel right, especially like right on the heels of the announcement that he's not going to play back-to-backs for the rest of his career. It just kind of feels unfair to say that he's a top 5 player in the league. He's just like, I'm just going to miss an average of like 18 games a year.
You could convince me that he should be below those guys. Maybe like between Steph and LeBron, maybe. The thing with Embiid is when he's out there, he's just so dominant, and it's just sort of hard to strike. I mean, he could be the best player in the league. So the fact that he's not number 1 and he's only at number 5, I don't know. So I've got Tatum, Steph, LeBron at 6, 7, 8. And rounding out my top 10, I've still got Kevin Durant, which I was a little surprised I still had him that high, but he's there. And then I have Anthony Edwards at 10.
So very similar to the ESPN's top 100 list.
It's close. Yeah, I think they had somebody different, but I've got, this is where I had a hard time. I put Jalen Brunson at 11. I'm like, he might be still better than Anthony Edwards. Edwards, what he can do defensively is like,
are you buying that hype already? I mean, like, I know he was productive.
Which hype for who?
For Brunson, like, and the 11th best player in the league.
So I thought I was giving into the hype with Anthony Edwards being this high.
I think Anthony Edwards is the 10th best player in the league.
Okay.
I think Jalen
So do
Brunson
I. That's why I
plays
had
in
him
New
here.
York. Yeah, I think Jalen Brunson plays in New York.
He could just that dude can get a bucket whenever he wants.
Yeah, if you're 5'10" and throw your head back, sure, you're going to get to the call. You're going to get the call a lot of times. But I mean, look, I love Brunson. I don't want to seem like I'm a Brunson hater, but there's so much hype going into it right now. Like already he's had like a season and a half of good basketball in New York, and they're crowning him above Patrick Ewing. It's like, come on, guys, be ridiculous.
It's a good point, and I think anybody in this group that I'm about to get to, and kind of the group I already hit a little bit, if anybody's going to fall, it feels like it'd be Brunson like this time next year. It'd be like, because it would not shock me if we already saw the best season we ever see from Jalen Brunson. Like that might be the best season. And if that, by the way, if that is, he was on MVP ballots, but he's still going to be like, I feel like all NBA pretty much every year, like in the conversation, not like first team, but like in the conversation for one of those 3 all NBA teams every year. So anyway, I got Devin Booker. You could convince me Devin Booker's better than Jalen Brunson. I wouldn't. That was a tough one for me. I got Anthony Davis at 13. I've got Victor Wembanyama at 14.
Oh.
I've got Halliburton. I knew you were going to take an issue with that one. I got Halliburton and then Donovan Mitchell at 15 and 16. And I thought it was interesting that ESPN and The Ringer both had them right next to each other, but flipped, right? I can't remember which one had which ahead of them. But I have Halliburton, then Donovan Mitchell. I have Bam at 17, Jaylen Brown at 18, John Morant at 19, because I can't quit John Morant. And then I got Jimmy Butler at 20. So that's my top 20.
2 Heat players in the top 20.
Yeah, and
Ja feels a little low, right? I mean, Ja
feels low, doesn't he? Like, I feel like he could easily be in the top 10. He was Anthony Edwards before Anthony Edwards was.
Right. I think we've forgotten with the off the court stuff and substance abuse and the guns and the injury, like, I mean, the reality is he just hasn't been the player he was 2 seasons ago. I
I
mean,
think
he
that's it.
was
If I
he was
just
a
need to
top
see it.
5 player at one point.
Oh,
Yeah,
100%.
maybe that's it.
I just need to see it one more year, but like what he's gone through, it's not the same thing that like Tiger Woods went through, because Tiger was like past his prime, but then all the off the course stuff with him and everything that happened there,
Yeah.
and he just was never able to bounce back, and there was an injury. I mean, there's like chronic back issues with Tiger, which is very different than sort of a one-off injury for Ja Morant. But I mean, Ja gets hurt kind of every year anyway. It's not always a season-ending injury. And then the off the court stuff, I think we just sort of, I think we underestimate how difficult it could be to just bounce back from that stuff like it never happened and get back to right where you were. But 100%, like if Ja is scoring 27 points and 8 assists a game for a month, he's right back into the top 10, easy. So that's my top 20. I had Jimmy at 20, and I was a little surprised that I had Jimmy Butler at 20, and this might be recency bias based on how good he looked these last 2 preseason games. But I'm like, really? How strongly would you feel about moving him behind like De'Aaron Fox, Trae Young, Damian Lillard? It feels like there's a group of players here that is very like, yeah, I don't really know what's going on with these guys right now. Maybe De'Aaron Fox I could put over him, and I wouldn't have a strong argument over it. But like some of these other guys, I'm like, I don't know.
Paul George.
Not as good as Jimmy. Not at this point.
Trae Young.
You could make the argument, but he's so bad defensively, man. I kind of put like a mental ceiling in my head of like he can't be higher than 20 for me, but I that could just be just a random dumb rule I made up.
ESPN had
it's him and
Tyrese Maxey on there too. Yeah,
I think Maxey's too high. I think he's like the hype guy right now. I wouldn't have him in the same class as Fox, Trae Young, Damian Lillard. Like those point guards to me, it's sort of similar to your Brunson argument. I'm like, give me one more year, Tyrese Maxey being awesome before I put him in with these really awesome players.
Okay. I can accept that.
Siakam, Kyrie, they're good.
No,
not top 20.
Yeah. No, I look. I mean, I think I've been a Siakam apologist for a long time. I remember when there was the possibility of trade talks and everything else like that, and I've always been a fan of what he can do. But he, there were bridges burnt in Toronto, and there were people kind of just saying, "Oh, he's overrated anyway." And it's like, yeah, is he really? Because he's kind of a top 25-ish sort of guy. I don't know. I still think Jimmy's probably better, but the issue of availability, I think it is a factor that you have to consider when looking at how you measure Jimmy Butler's impact. When he's out there and he's engaged and available, 20 feels about right.
Yeah. So that's where I had it. Not that anybody cares, but ESPN has their rankings, and this is the one that always gets debated. And so here's where they had, and they also, there's some other Heat players on some of these lists, but I want to focus on Jimmy and Bam for now. We can get to some of the other ones later, but ESPN had Bam at 18 and Jimmy at 28. And having Jimmy at 28, that seems to be the headline going around here these last couple of days. And just for context here, they had Jimmy at 12 last year. So they dropped him from 12 to 28. They actually dropped, I don't remember them having Bam at 16. I guess they did. They dropped Bam from 16 to 18. So both of these guys dropped, but again, the headliner here is Jimmy falling all the way to 28, and they had Victor Wembanyama in the top 10, I think. But yeah,
yes.
So, but Jimmy Butler, 28. What do you think?
Again, it's a factor of availability. I think that was the biggest thing that was held against him. We're talking about him being historically good in a finals run, and that's why they had that in mind. Like that was it kind of shows the recency bias of all of this, and you take the breadth of their work, the entirety of what they've been able to accomplish over the course of their career, but you also just look at what they've done recently. Again, we just talked about Ja Morant, a guy who was a top 5 player 2 seasons ago, and now he's barely top 20, right? Or not even top 20. So I think that kind of plays a huge factor in it, and I think it's fair. I think, to be honest with you, it feels like the right choice based on, is he the 28th best player in the league? No, he's better than that. But given the fact that he hasn't played often and that he could get older and he could be entering some sort of decline phase in his career, despite what we've seen over the last few preseason games, 28 seems about right.
So I guess my biggest gripe here is some of the players that are ranked over him feel a little bit too much of that recency bias thing. So number one, Kyrie at 25. Kyrie's not a better player than Jimmy Butler. He's just not. Like the height. I know that the Mavericks just made the finals and everything, but Kyrie is so trick or treat, man. Like that guy, every made shot looks so beautiful that I think his reputation is greater than what his actual production is, because that guy misses a lot of dumb shots and he takes a lot of dumb shots. So, and as a playmaker, he's not a great one. Like all he really does is like he makes incredible shots that nobody else in the league can make, but that's kind of all he does defensively. I know there was like some hype around him, like, oh, he's really trying defensively. It's like, all right, cool. He's still Kyrie Irving defensively. And, he's not a big steals machine guy, which it tends to be how guys his size, kind of make up for that on defense. And then again, as a playmaker, he's not even really a point guard and hasn't been, right? Like the Brooklyn Nets tried doing it with him and Kevin Durant, had to trade for James Harden because Kyrie's not a real point guard. LeBron was the real point guard in Cleveland. Right now, it's obviously Luka Doncic. So I don't know. I feel like there's not enough there. And then Paolo at 24. Like, really? We're at the point. So ESPN does do the thing, I guess it's worth noting here, where they're saying this is what we think it's going to be for next season. So it is a projection forward. So they're assuming like a climb for Paolo and a leap for him, and then Jimmy declining at age 36. So I could see the argument there, and the availability thing certainly is a big deal. But I don't know, like, would you rather have 60 games of Jimmy Butler or 70 games of Paolo Banchero? I think that's a fair question.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, Banchero, the better scorer, better rebounder,
similar
other
rebounders.
Other than that,
not a better
worse
defender.
As a defender,
not nearly the playmaker. Like you can
run
your offense through Jimmy. Magic are still trying to figure that part out.
Right. So I definitely not better than Jimmy Butler. Could he be if he takes a substantial leap then this year?
Well, the Magic are certainly hoping so. That's sort of the whole plan here. That's why they didn't go out and get a lead ball handler this summer. But these aren't even the worst ones that were ranked ahead of Jimmy Butler. I'll tell you who it is, and the guy that I'm most mad about. We'll do that next year on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by Hims. Guys, you ever feel like maybe you just need a little boost in the bedroom? Well, it happens to everybody. It's time for you to stop worrying about your performance and get Hims so you can feel confident knowing you can get hard and stay hard wherever you're in the mood. Hims is changing men's healthcare by providing you with access to affordable sexual health treatments from the comfort of your couch. Hims provides access to a range of doctors' trusted ED treatments like chewable hard mints and Viagra and Cialis, and of course their generics as well, for up to 95% of cost. The process is 100% online, so there's no need for an uncomfortable doctor visit. You just answer a series of questions on their site, and a medical provider will determine the right treatment options for you. Prescribed, your medication ships directly to you in a discreet packaging, for free. No insurance is needed, and one low price covers everything from treatments to ongoing care. With hundreds of thousands of trusted subscribers, Hims can help you find the ED option that works for you. So start your free online visit today at hims.com/lockdown. That's Hims, HIMS.com/lockdown for your personalized ED treatment options. Hims.com/lockdown. The product mentions are chewable compounded products which are not approved by or verified for safety or effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions do apply. You can see website for details and important safety information. A subscription is required and price varies based on product and subscription plan. We'll be right back.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen of the day. We want to invite you to the exclusive Locked On Heat Insider community. If you want to join, there's a link in the show notes on YouTube and in the podcast description. If you join, you're going to get a lot of cool stuff, exclusive content, insider info, reporting on the ground, game notes, stats, while we cover these games live, first dibs at mailbags, and best of all, the chance to talk with us one-on-one through the subtext messaging platform. A bunch of you have already signed up, and we're already having a lot of fun having and building this little community. Remember, you can sign up with the show note with the link in the show notes. It's free for 14 days, so you can give it a try at no cost. And then after that, it goes to $4.99 a month, and you can cancel it at any time, no sweat. Really excited for this chance to connect with you all this season. So, Kyrie, Paolo, all right, whatever. You could talk me into it. Maybe Paolo more than Kyrie there, but
I know who you're having an issue with.
All right, tell me.
Is it Damian Lillard?
No.
Oh,
where'd they have Dame?
I thought he was in early 20s.
No, not necessarily.
Okay.
to me, it's Kawhi. Kawhi Leonard at 22? Like, if you're going to hold availability against Jimmy Butler, I mean, what are we even doing here? And obviously, these rankings came out before the report on Thursday about how Kawhi is just going to be sidelined indefinitely with right knee inflammation, which doesn't sound awesome for the Clippers. But like, if you're gonna hold the availability thing against Jimmy Butler, what are you even doing here with Kawhi Leonard? I mean, that's not even a question. Come on.
He played more games than Jimmy did last year. I think that's, we're kind of missing the lead here a little bit. Like that's fine. And Jimmy was, Jimmy was great when he did play. Obviously we talked about this enough, but with Kawhi, like he was top 5-ish in the league for a couple months. There was a stretch there, maybe weeks. There was a stretch there where he had the Clippers rolling. And they were atop the Western Conference, and he looked fantastic, as good as ever.
Isn't that what Kawhi does though? Like he does his playoff Jimmy thing, but like in January for a little bit and then gets hurt again.
Now he does.
That's sort of his deal. And if it's a projection forward, like Kawhi is the one who got yanked from Team USA because of this knee inflammation. Hasn't played in the preseason at all. Like, who do we think? Yeah, maybe Kawhi played more games than Jimmy last year, but who do we really realistically think is going to play more games this upcoming year? I think everybody, if you had to put money, had to put $5 on it, I think you would reluctantly put Jimmy Butler, but I think you would put it on Jimmy. I don't know. That to me seems a little crazy.
It's going to be garbage without Kawhi.
But they have a brand new arena, though. Did you hear?
Yeah, they've got James Harden, too.
He's got James Harden, Derek Jones Jr.
Those
are the ones I had the issue with. The Ringer also had Kawhi at 18. I bet you they want to take that one back after this report, and they had Jimmy at 19.
Yeah, I mean, he was a great player last year. I don't think that's fair. It's tough because you have to balance what you think they'll be versus what they were. Kawhi was a better player last year. He was more available than Jimmy. He just won't be this year. At least the expectation is that he won't be.
Let's talk about Bam Adebayo. So ESPN had Bam at 18. The Ringer had him at 20. What are your? I have no issues with this. I think I've been saying for a couple of years now, Bam's a top 20 player. We can debate 18, 19, 20, wherever, but I think that he's a top 20 guy.
I don't think it's a debatable issue. I think he is a top 20 guy. I think he also, moreover, though, it kind of signifies a huge shift in the culture for the Heat that he's surpassed Jimmy. Like I think pound for pound, you would say Jimmy's the better player in the larger stage. You have to be there. You have to be available to play at the larger stage in order to be able to showcase that talent. If you're talking about an in-game basis on a nightly, regular season kind of schedule, Bam's probably going to be the player that you can count on more, especially if we continue to see this diverse diet with a three-point shot now adding to his scoring totals and still being able to do all the other things that he does so well. I mean, it could be a huge season for Bam, and I think maybe if he continues to shoot the ball as well as he does, he could wind up climbing into top 15 player territory.
I wanted to ask you that. So if the three-point shooting is for real, I think the assist numbers are going to go up this year just by how the offense works now. We're seeing a lot more of those dribble handoffs and those things that got Bam to like 5 and 6 assists per game as opposed to like 4 a game where he's been in the last couple of years. So if you add, let's call it 6 assists a game with the 10 rebounds per game, and now you got the three-point shooting.
Right.
As a real weapon here. And he's taking like 3.3 3-point attempts per game in the preseason, and that's playing a little bit more than, basically a half per game. So I don't know, 4 3-pointers per game for Bam, I think would be a fair guesstimate, maybe even more. Like if that's part of the deal now, how high do you think Bam could get by the end of the season?
I mean, when you're talking about his impact, you're talking about one of the best defensive players, if not the best defensive player in the NBA, regardless of whether or not he wins the award. And given everything else that he does, and you're talking about this increased scoring total, I mean, that's a top 10 player.
Isn't it? I mean, you look at the guys who have that, the plus scoring and the efficient scoring, plus the defense, plus the rebounding, plus the playmaking. I mean, you're talking about a select group of big men.
Ooh.
Like you're talking about Jokic, Giannis.
He's not as nearly a defender that Bam is.
Right? I mean, far and away a superior offensive player, but I'm talking. But he's in that. Those are the kind. Okay. That's the kind of company he's starting to be in. It's Jokic, Giannis. It's Giannis, it's Embiid when he's out there,
AD,
and Anthony Davis, and that's it. And Bam, you would argue, is part of that group right now, but I think everybody would put him a pretty clear. What is that? 5 guys. He would be a pretty clear fifth in that group. But what's stopping Bam from overcoming Anthony Davis? Heck, I mean, if Embiid's entering another phase of his career, what's stopping Bam from going there? I mean, he doesn't even necessarily need to leap those guys. I mean, let's say Bam is, I don't know, what's realistic points per game for him? 23, 24?
If the 3-point shot is legitimate and he's able to take that shot consistently and he can still get to the line as often as he has, I think so. I think
so let's go low end. Let's go 23. Let's say it's 23, 11, and 6. That's
pretty solid production?
I'm looking at the guy right in front of him on the ESPN ranking. Is he a better player than Donovan Mitchell? I think so. When you include defense,
given his defense, yeah.
If you Halliburton, I mean, maybe. I mean, Halliburton is one of these guys who can climb. Devin Booker, I think he leaps Booker. Jaylen Brown, I already have him over Jaylen Brown. Anthony Davis is at 13. Jalen Brunson at 12. Maybe Jalen Brunson takes a little bit of a slide when the hype wears off. If you think that's going to happen this year, I mean, that is now the range we're talking about. So we're talking about Bam as a potential, like a fringe top 15 and a fringe top 10 guy. It's pretty remarkable, and that might be underselling it, right? I mean, Wembanyama is going to keep climbing too in terms of the centers, but
empty calories.
Empty calories. Steve sucks. I have one last question for you about Jimmy Butler and what his ranking means for the Miami Heat this season. We're going to get to that. Plus, how many future Hall of Famers are currently on the Miami Heat roster? All that and more coming up next here on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, and it's #1 for so many reasons. Sometimes you're watching a game, you get a hunch in the middle of it, and you want to check out the latest stats. Well, guess what? You can do all that, plus you can view live play-by-play and so much more, and it's all on the same page where you place your bets. And all you have to do is get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's just $5, you get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed, but only if you go visit FanDuel.com today. That's FanDuel.com to get started. We'll be right back.
Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. If you're new to us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. You can also follow us on your favorite podcast app. Regular season getting started next week, so you're going to want to follow along. What's that?
Before we get to Jimmy, I mean, you got Tyler Hero, Jaime Jaquez climbing into that top 100 as well.
All right, let's talk about that before I get to my Jimmy Butler question here. So you got ESPN had Tyler Hero at 76. The Ringer had him at 79, so basically the same. ESPN had Jaime at 86. The Ringer did not list Jaime Jaquez in their top 100, but ESPN has him at 86. I was a little surprised to see him in the top 100, if I'm being honest.
Jaime or Tyler?
Jaime. Yeah, no, Tyler Hero is a 20-point per game scorer. All those guys are on the list, but
given the discourse this summer, there you go. Given the discourse this summer and some of the other guys that kind of fit into that same scoring wing mentality that maybe have a limited game, and that's how a lot of people perceive Tyler Hero. He's in the same room as Jordan Poole and Anthony Simons and guys like that. They already have somebody like that on the roster.
Simons is top 100. Like all these guys got. The only reason Jordan Poole didn't get there is because he's so inefficient with the ball and he just turns it over every other time he's taking it down.
He plays for the Wizards too.
Yeah, it doesn't help him. I mean, it's probably the opposite of the hype machine on Jordan Poole right now. But like all those guys, Anthony Simons, like all those guys ended up. I mean, you scored 20 points per game 3 years in a row. You're a top 100 player in the NBA. You can have your warts. People could debate whether or not he's a #1 scoring option, all this stuff, like whatever. He clearly isn't and never was and never should have been. But 76 best player in the NBA. Yeah, that's about right.
I think that's a wake up call for a lot of Heat fans. I mean, well, maybe not. Maybe it's just like, oh, what the hell does ESPN know? I think all the other rankings have been fair. They can debate them as much as you want to, but the fact that the media in general sees this guy's production and still rates him as the 76th best player, and yet Heat fans kind of think he's absolute trash, that he's no better than your standard two-way pick. And I know that's the heavy end of the spectrum there, but just to even have that kind of opinion and you measure it against respected media members that watch these games and understand his impact on a nightly basis, I'm just a little surprised. And I think he can climb into top 50. I don't know overall if you're looking whether or not Miami has a championship window or not. It's hard to make a case for a contending team without a top 10 player on the roster, given the fact that maybe Bam can make that push if he's a consistent scorer. If Jimmy's healthy and available, he could certainly be top 15 as well. And if Tyler continues what we've seen from him the preseason, I know it's only the preseason, but given the trend playing the off ball, shooting well, being able to absorb impact on the way to the rim, etc. Those are all positives that he's displayed this offseason. I'm saying this preseason. He could be a top 50, 40-ish player, I think. I mean, might be his ceiling.
Look, I don't know if that seems pretty high when you start looking at who's in like the top 50. I mean, Franz Wagner is 52. OG Anunoby is 51. You know, like we're talking about now two-way type of players when we get into the top 50. But I think
Wagner's a two-way player?
Well, I guess the idea is that he can be, right? Because he's got the size and stuff. I mean, the guy hasn't made a three-pointer in each calendar year, but but like you got Jaren Jackson at 55, Derek Lively at 56, Alperen Şengün at 54. Like these guys are better. But like Kobe White at 58.
Yeah, that's
seems a little bit high for me for Kobe White, but that's a hype train thing. But for me, like Tyler's biggest knock is the efficiency, right? But if he does the things you're talking about, getting to the rim more like he has in the preseason, being more of a catch and shoot guy, 3-pointers are going in higher, like right there, top 60-ish, that seems to be where it is. And those are like I listed some good players. Darius Garland, 57, like those are good players. So yeah, I don't think that there's a problem there. So here's my Jimmy Butler question: can the Heat make a deep run in the playoffs if Jimmy Butler is not a top 15 guy?
The answer is yes, because they've done it. It's just that if Jimmy Butler morphs into a top 10 player, right? Maybe even a top 5 player based on his overall production. So I mean, that's always the question. And I don't, you're expecting leaps across the board. Again, we're talking about Bam flirting with top 10, Tyler entering the top 50 category. Like if that's realistic, then maybe Jimmy doesn't have to be, but no, I still think you can't, that's not how the playoffs work. Like you have to have somebody. Egalitarian offense works during the regular season. In the playoffs, you need your guy to just take over games. And that's what Jimmy Butler has been doing over the course of his career, and certainly in his stint with Miami. I don't know that Bam is ready for that responsibility just yet, because I just don't.
No, I don't think that's his role in the offense either, right? Like he's not the hammer. Jimmy Butler's the hammer. It feels like Bam is the hub. And the hub, like you said, is more having that system in place. I'm like reminded of those Mike Budenholzer Hawks teams, where they had the 5 offense, spread the floor, the whole thing, and it looked beautiful for the regular season. Then they got to the playoffs, and when they needed a bucket, they didn't know who to give the ball to. And it was like Paul Millsap trying to do stuff. Where now if the Heat kind of do that through the regular season, and then the playoffs come around, and you could do that for 3 quarters, but when you really need a bucket, you just give the ball to Jimmy Butler, and that might be what this whole thing is designed to do here. Okay. You sent me this thing from Bleacher Report. They came out with an article. You sent it to me about how many future Hall of Famers are currently playing in the NBA. And they had a bunch of Heat names on the list. I think more than maybe most Heat fans would expect to see there before you really start thinking about it. So they had Jimmy Butler and Kevin Love as sure things. And then Bam Adebayo as a fringe guy. Which of those names interest you the most?
I think it's Bam, right? The fact that, again, he's already entering into that conversation, because again, you're looking at the total scope of what he's been able to accomplish over his career, and right now it seems awfully premature given the lack of postseason accolades and the fact that he hasn't won a championship. But you're also talking about a 2-time gold medalist, so it's not just the NBA and what he's accomplished there, it's basketball in general. That's an impressive body of work to have 2 gold medals. I know you're part of an incredible ensemble cast with superstars, etc., but he contributed. He was a starter, and certainly that plays a role in it. And you're talking about somebody who's been a top 5 defender in the league since 2019. All that matters too. Like Draymond, I think it was 86 percentile chance of getting into the Hall of Fame. And that's a guy who at his peak was a better defender than maybe Bam, but at the same time, he's not nearly as productive in the other areas as Bam has been. So I think there's a very realistic chance that Bam winds up becoming a Hall of Famer. I remember asking him this not last summer, but the previous summer, when we were talking about Dwayne's enshrinement in the Hall of Fame, and he told me, like, hell yeah, it's a possibility. It's like that was a goal for him, and I was thinking, is it? Can it be? And that felt premature because he had just won gold, etc. But at the same time, a couple All-Star selections later, it's not such a impossible option.
I mean, look at it. It's 3-time NBA All-Star, including the last 2 years, and it feels like that's just going to be a thing now. Right. I mean, this is the guy. He's got the popularity vote now. A guy just brought a gold medal to the USA. He's part of the NBA's promo for not Jimmy Butler. Bam Adebayo is head to head with like Jason Tatum or somebody for the promo. And so, yeah, he's a star. So he's going to be making all-star games. So 3 all-star games already under his belt. He's probably going to end up with 7-ish, 6, 7, 8, something like that. It feels like that might even be small, not a lot. NBA all-defensive first team last year, 4-time all-defensive second team. So he's got 5 all-defensive teams. And now that it's positionless, he's going to be all-defensive first team for the next 5 years, it feels like. I don't think that's crazy. So we're talking about a guy who's going to be on 10 all-defensive teams when it's all said and done. And I don't know if he's done with the Olympics. He could have another gold medal by the time his career is over. Maybe 2. Like, he's got time. And so if this guy's like a 10-time all-defensive player, a 7-time all-star, 3 or 4-time gold medalist, that is a basketball Hall of Famer, even if he never wins a championship. And then if you add 1 championship in there in his career at minimum, it's a lock. So yeah, it does start to make sense here. And by the way, he's gonna 20 points, 10 rebounds, and 5 assists per game for 10 years. You start moving up a lot of charts, and your total numbers at the end of your career look really good. So it's not just sort of these team-wide accolades. Like, his numbers are going to back it up too. So yeah,
does he need the defensive player of the year in order to be a lock?
No. If he's got that many all-defensive teams, especially if they're first team now, with the best thing that happened to him is the positionless going away, or the positionless coming in, the positions going away. So if you're
Did Draymond win? Has Draymond won it? Yeah, he has won.
Yeah, he's got 1 or 2.
Yeah, I think at least 1.
Not enough. Rudy Gobert has one of his too. That'll do it for us today. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app.